8:15. It's time for Extra Shot with the whole crew today. Thank you, Rob and Michelle, for joining us. And
Good morning.
Take notice to the sparkly
Why
Sperry's.
do you have to put my Sperry's? I forgot to put my heels on, and now I'm just in my Sperry's, and everyone can see my dry, ashy legs, like Camille likes to put it. But thank you.
Michelle,
Good morning.
you're never ashy.
Ashy.
Michelle's never
Look,
ashy.
okay, let's not talk about it anymore. Moving forward.
Because that's what happens when you say, oh, don't look at them. We all want to see them.
Right, exactly.
Okay, so what happened in one classroom that's causing all of social media to speak out? Not just social media, parents across our country, right? I'm having computer issues, but go ahead, Cornelia.
Oh,
speak on this.
So we'll talk about this. School in New Jersey, specifically Cliffside Park High School, on Monday, students walked out in protest because kids were in class speaking amongst themselves, and they were speaking Spanish. The teacher then got upset, yelled out, I need you guys to speak American. Specifically what she said, men and women are fighting. They're not fighting for your right to speak Spanish. They're fighting for your right to speak American. And then with that said, at least 50 students were wearing and waving flags, Puerto Rican, Dominican Republic, and Brazil flags, walked out of class and gathered on the front steps of their school in protest because of what the teacher said and how they felt about the situation. So a lot of people chiming in. This is on our Facebook page. In case you have not seen it, check the complete article out. But you know, it is causing some issues. The school has said they're meeting about it behind closed doors to figure out if they're going to suspend the school.
But this was a substitute filling in, correct?
She is a teacher at the school, but she was not. That is not her class.
Okay. Okay.
So she.
I don't know if that makes any
filling in the
difference,
class.
though. Probably not. But I think in the teacher's defense, I'm not trying to take sides, but if I had to take the teacher's side in this case, I think in general, if you're note taking, if you're note passing, speaking behind the teacher's back, if you're not paying attention, in general, it's pretty rude if a student is doing any of those things, like if they're on their phone or doing anything like that. So I can understand why the teacher might have been frustrated, but for him or her to go on the other side and say, speak American, it's just completely out of line.
Right.
Well, you speak English?
Yeah, there's no.
There's no such thing. American. That's like speak Mexican. Like no, that's not a language. No. It's a country and a culture. But so I think it's just wrong, factually incorrect, and maybe there's some offense there of like, oh, we are American and Americans can speak Spanish, and B, it's a free country. We can speak whatever language we want. But to Michelle's point, yes, if they were speaking at a time when they weren't supposed to be speaking any language, they're supposed to be silent for, I don't know, was it during a test? Do we know what it was
Not
during?
specifically what it was during, but there is, one of the students did catch video, and we're going to try to get that for you. It's a quick 25-second video of what actually happened. You can hear her yelling in the background. You can see some students starting to walk out. But again, now the question is, should they be suspended because they did walk out of class? There was a protest involved, and then the school board superintendent will try to get some resolution. Here we go with the video.
This is Thomas E. Franklin for NorthJersey.com.
And you can see here one of the students starting to walk out, a lot of commotion. And again, like you probably didn't hear in the video, but the teacher said, men and women are fighting. They're not fighting for your right to speak Spanish. They are fighting for your right to speak American.
Okay. And I think you know, if it's a discipline thing with the students and all that, I think those are all side issues. I think the main issue is if you speak American, is that English only? And I think that people are, from their perspective, I think they're sort of missing some of the context of what it means to be an American. For example, Puerto Rico, they are U.S. citizens.
Right.
They speak Spanish. That is the language that is spoken in Puerto Rico. And I'm sure some speak English as well.
Yeah, most Puerto Ricans are bilingual.
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, that's just one aspect of it. Here's another thing that is coming to light more and more these days. I was just in Montana, and we were in the Flathead Lake area. And as we were driving through a reservation, the signs are bilingual. They're in English, and they're also in the indigenous language as well, with the spelling and everything. And you're going to see more and more of that because communication is so personal, and we commonly use English as language in the United States, and it's the official language in so many different ways. But I think for some perspective, to speak American is really to speak the language of your choice and how you choose to communicate.
Yes.
And I'm sure that a lot of those students took offense to that because perhaps they are Puerto Rican themselves. So there's a lot going on all in that one
all
story.
in that one story. And there's a lot going on with our comments here. Yeah. So thank you to everyone who's tuned in right now. We do appreciate you. If we have newcomers watching Extra Shot, we are here every day at 8:15, and we appreciate you chiming in here. Jolene White Gosner says, speak American. Where'd she get her credential? So people are having issue with this substitute teacher. Lori Moore said, should have said speak English. Yes, we agree. Raymond Scooter, Houston, speak American. There's a language called American. How is this lady even a teacher? Glenn McBurney Jr., teacher doesn't sound very smart. So, okay, we get that point.
But then one comment
Christy, are you seeing that one?
Well, I see Christy, and then Jenny says, kids, regardless of views, do not have the right to protest. Show respect. Kids treat substitutes horrible. There are other ways to handle things behind closed doors with administration.
How do we feel about that? When saying kids don't have the right
we have the right to protest.
Right, we have the right to protest. Or are you saying that if kids have an issue, they shouldn't speak up? I think, isn't that what we're teaching our kids, that if they feel as though that they are being discriminated against, whether it's their race, their color of their skin, or the language they speak, they should be strong individuals and be able to speak up. There's a way to protest, not going and being violent, never endorsing the violence. But if what exactly are they doing for those who are just chiming in, the students as they're protesting? Are they standing in front of the school?
Oh, they're standing in front of the school, waving flags, chanting, and the chants were in Spanish and English. Different phrases, just saying that, they kind of want to be respected in regards to what's happening in their views.
Did they miss class? Do we know if they missed class?
Yes, they walked out for a fourth period. So to be clear, and let me get the exact timing. They did walk out during class. The protest broke up around 11:30 a.m. when the fire alarm sounded and the school evacuated. Some students kept chanting and kept on with the protest, but it was during actual school.
How do we feel about that?
I will say, though, if you're in class, I mean, okay, these kids are fearless. I mean, if they're protesting, they're standing up for their rights, they're getting out of class and doing that, that's so amazing for them. But growing up, I was always told, you sit in your chair, you listen to your teacher. That is just not common. Growing up, I never saw students protesting in high school, for that matter. So this is just brand new to me. So I think for me, I'm almost taken back by this whole thing.
But what if a teacher, right, authority figure, has crossed some line where you are truly offended or worse? Then, I mean, I know what you're taught in school and what you're supposed to do, but is there a line that somebody can cross where then you take action yourself? I mean, I think everyone has that line somewhere, and for those students, it was crossed.
At one point, I grew up in Flint, Michigan, and y'all know I'm always on the side of the people. So if people want to protest and you feel like that's what you need to do to get your point across, do what you got to do. But at one point, it was a little bit after I graduated from high school, a lot of teachers in my city got pink slips. Great teachers. A lot of teachers were getting laid off, and at one point, teachers and students walked out of class and protested because it was pretty much like, these are some of the best teachers. You're sticking us with other teachers who don't really care about us. So-and-so cares about us, and you're giving them the pink slip. So it was like a huge thing where students and teachers were protesting together. So I've seen it happen.
Was anything resolved from that, just out of curiosity?
Well, it had a lot to do with some schools closing. Some of the teachers who did get a pink slip ended up going to different schools. So it kind of changed the conversation a little bit. But again, if you feel away, then we do, as Americans, have a right to protest.
We do.
You just have to, there's consequences sometimes.
We have a lot of people weighing in.
Oh yeah, let's go.
Sandra says, do we want to teach people of problems come which they will just walk away, or teach them a process in which to handle the matters? Protests in this day and age are becoming an everyday occurrence and seem to bear no fruit. And Annette says, sounds like they were prepared. They had flags on hand. This must not be the first time this has been said to them. Students are often not heard. Now people are listening. I bet they have even already brought this to administrators' attention and nothing happened. So the question is, did these students protest beforehand and now they just got on video, or did they go to the principal but like after this incident? Because it looks like they were ready from what Annette is saying. Like they have these flags ready. They're ready to show them off and make their stance.
I think an interesting comment really quick. Sandra Dykema says the kids should have a consequence and be taught the proper way to handle controversy. I'd like to know from you, Sandra, what you suggest is a proper way to handle controversy, because in this country, to be able to protest non-violently is is one way to protest, and I don't think that is a wrong way to protest. So I commend these kids for having a voice, the guts, you know, the guts to say, hey, I'm going to stand up for what I feel is right, and for my country, and for my language, and for being American in this country. My only thing is that if they didn't want to hear any backlash at all, if you want to do it in a way where no one can say, hey, you can't do that, because you do have a right to protest, just maybe wait till before or after school or during a passing period, because at the end of the day, you're in class, you're supposed to be in class. You don't want to take away from your education in your next class by protesting. If it was during the class in which they were being discriminated against, I could maybe see that as trying to get their point across. But that's just my opinion. What do you think?
Yeah, and let me switch gears a little bit, because the question or the discussion was speaking American as far as the only language you could speak according to that teacher possibly in her mind was English.
Right.
But in regards to being bilingual and as a country, because we're now a global economy, the United States is one of in the 5 last place of bilingual countries in the world. The five countries, Canada, UK, United States, Australia, well, 4. We're in the 4 last place: UK, Canada, Australia, and the United States of being behind in being multilingual. The top 5 countries that are trilingual: Israel, Indonesia, Spain, Holland, and Sweden. And the top 5 bilingual countries: Israel, Egypt, Indonesia, Saudi Arabia, and Sweden. So when it comes to this idea that in America you can only speak English or there should only be one language, is that the case globally? Because if we want to compete on a global level and you want your kids to be able to get the same kind of jobs that everybody else is getting, to have the same kind of opportunity to say in the same resume, and we only speak one language, I think we may need to address that, because globally we're behind.
And if the teacher, another way the teacher could have handled this, if it wasn't about the language, which in this case it seems like it was, if it was just about, to your point, Michelle, about them just speaking in general, using their voice in a time where he wanted them to be quiet for whatever, maybe it was during a test, then he could have just said, please stop talking, like any of our teachers probably did. But then to say, speak American, which again, as we've addressed, American is not a language. American is whatever language you want to speak in this country as Americans.
And here's something interesting too. I mean, students, it's not really settled when your rights kick in. Being a student is kind of a gray area, and being a young person, because some of these rights, you know, your right to vote, well, when you're 18.
When you're 18, yeah.
Okay, so now you're a citizen with rights when you're 18. Some stuff kicks in earlier. Right to bear arms, there's some age restrictions in some places not a whole lot. So when does your First Amendment right to free speech, when does that kick in? I don't even know if that's settled, and students are testing that because they're told one thing: sit in your seat, don't say anything, you're in school, these are our rules right now. But wait a second, you're a U.S. citizen, you do have a First Amendment right. So what day does that kick in, on your 18th birthday or before? It is a gray area that is being tested by these students.
So what was the exact class that this was actually going down in? Like,
I don't think we know the specific
I don't want to learn another, I don't want to speak another language if you're teaching me math. Like, that's already complicated in itself. So it's already 2 different languages. Like, math's a whole different language, and you're trying to teach another language, and these kids are trying to speak in another one. So it's almost a situation where no one understands each other.
Well, according to this, they were speaking amongst themselves. Like, the class was going on and they were having a side conversation amongst themselves.
Okay.
Like, yeah, this is what we're doing, and they were talking in Spanish. So it wasn't that.
So the teacher was more or less irritated.
The teacher was more or less irritated, probably by them disrupting. And it sounds like because they were disrupting, speaking another language besides English.
Carlos Jr. Espino, handle it when it happens. Don't wait until after school. Then school will tell you should have came to us when it happens. Good point, because I suggested maybe wait between passing periods or something. So he says you got to handle it head on when it happens. Sandra Dykema, again, does the school not have communication process in which to try and handle the situation first? Again, talking about boundaries. What is the proper way to handle the situation? So keep chiming in with your suggestions on how they maybe should have handled this situation. There needs to be, Reggie Cepeda, there needs to be mutual respect. This was a planned event. Granted, it's good for them to have the guts to do it.
I will say one thing in the teacher's defense in this. I was a substitute teacher for a while right after college.
Really?
Yeah, for a little bit in Santa Barbara.
I didn't know that.
And, you know, to say what this individual said and the reaction, all that is controversy, but I can understand the moment of frustration. okay?
Right.
Because when you are the authority figure and you've got 30 students in a room and no one's listening to you, and we understand that this is a teacher, but that wasn't that person's class. So there's this power.
Already not listening.
Yeah, exactly. You just get really frustrated really quickly.
Okay.
And I think, you know, we were all students. We remember when a sub came in and lost it, right? Because no one was paying attention, turning off the lights, yelling, hey, everybody sit down, listen, or something, lashing out in some way. So I can understand the human reaction of just kind of losing it momentarily. So there is some, I guess, empathy toward that. However, it obviously rose to a level that offended a lot of people.
That you have a good point about being a substitute teacher.
It is tough. Frustrating.
But again, the teacher could have just said, "Please stop talking." If that was the problem,
that's it. That's all they should have said. There's something else
crossed the
underlying
line, in my opinion, when he said "speak American," because again, American isn't a language. And then why are you telling us not to and try to advance in our language speaking skills?
And then the comment was, "Men and women are fighting. They're not fighting for your right to speak Spanish. They're fighting for your right to speak American." So again, when you dive deep with additional comments, it sounds like it's not that they're disrupting. It was taken to, okay, so now we have a military, and the military is fighting for this, and they're not fighting for you because you're speaking Spanish.
No, they're fighting for your right as an American.
Right.
So,
David Klutskik, I'm proud of all the young people who are standing up for their rights. If you can't protest when you are young, when can you protest?
Right, exactly. I think, again, this is a gray area. I remember when I was a student thinking, wait a second, why can I do something at 18 versus like 17 3/4? Like, what is really this magical threshold when you turn 18 that all of a sudden now you can participate in a democracy versus when the same decisions were affecting you when you were 15, 16, even when you were newborn.
Right.
So it's obviously you don't vote when you're newborn. That's not what I'm saying. But what I'm saying is like, because there's this moment when you're a teenager, you start to figure things out. You're thinking on your own. You may disagree with your parents. You may disagree with what's going on in the world, but you can't do anything about it. It's an odd position to be in.
But how do we feel though about this generation? And I'm not even of that generation anymore. I'm long beyond high school. But the generation of high schoolers who now have social media, who now are able to voice their opinion on everything, see that everyone has an opinion about something, therefore they want one too. And when it comes to school and when it comes to those who are in an authoritative position, like a teacher, not that all teachers are right all the time, but they're in that position. They go through a lot of schooling to be in that position. They're dealing with all of these students at one time. How do we feel about this generation thinking that if they have a problem with something, maybe they don't like a lot of homework, does that give them the right to protest? If they don't like something, does that give them the right? Or should, as a student, what is your role as a student? Has anyone ever defined that to us? As a student, where do our boundaries lie? You should listen, you should be a good student, you should get A's. I mean, how do we feel about that? People just wanting to speak out about everything now.
But and kids speak out about anything anyway. Some kids complain about homework
But when it comes to protesting and disrupting the classroom.
But again, if you feel, but that's the point of the protest. If you feel like something is affecting you and it's going to affect your ability to learn, your livelihood, your safety, anything that affects your being or your peers, then you decide as an American citizen what you want to do about that, and sometimes people choose to protest. People have been protesting in this country since the beginning of the time. Disruption has happened in this country to get us to where we are today. Correct. So this idea that now all of a sudden protests are a bad thing. They weren't a bad thing when they dumped tea in the Boston Harbor. That wasn't a bad thing then. So I think it depends on the person and what you are trying to accomplish. But one question I always want to ask, and it's about being, again, bilingual and multilingual. When you go overseas and you travel, let's say you go to China, or you take your family somewhere and y'all go on a nice trip, do you demand people in that country to speak English because you speak it? Do you speak English, and do you get frustrated when no one speaks English? Because
that's your own fault for going to that country and not knowing the language.
But again, if you do that, and if you at any point want or expect someone to speak your language and you come over there, then you have to recognize what you're doing here. As Americans, do we demand everybody to speak English everywhere? Because if we do, that says something about us.
What does it say?
It says to us that we have this idea that English should be the end all be all, and that there are no other languages that should be of significance in this world. That's where I'm starting to I'm taking this. Because what's wrong with somebody speaking Spanish in America? What's wrong with that?
Absolutely nothing wrong, and we encourage it. Isn't taking a second language mandatory at the high school level? I would like a teacher to be able to chime in at this point, but when I was in school, you had to take a second language. So I think if it wasn't important, and if people had a problem, if the school districts across this country had a problem with the second language, they wouldn't make it mandatory. So I think we see the value in it. Of course, but there needs to, I mean, and correct me if I'm wrong, this is just me speaking freely here, but there needs to be that language that everyone speaks, at least speaks cohesively, and if you don't, then you're trying to learn it, right? When kids come from a different country, ESL, right, English as a second language, if that's their language, then they try to make it their first language too. It's never going to be their first, but they try to learn it so that we can all have a common ground, and then from there, learn a second, third, fourth, fifth language. It's only going to better you as a human being and as a well-cultured person.
Back to your point of us learning a second language in high school. Other European countries, they learn English when they're in elementary and middle school. They learn it early on. So is that one of those, like, America is a superpower and people have to learn how to speak English?
Or is it that we need to get a head start and teach our children other languages in
elementary
school like they're doing? Because if they're teaching kids English in elementary school, why aren't we teaching kids Spanish in elementary school?
Because, well, if you're talking about, are you talking about in school or like at home? It's because generations don't know the other languages to be able to teach our kids. I would love for my child one day to be
add it to school.
Add it to school right away. And what would be the second language?
Spanish.
Spanish?
Yeah, that would be a good place to start. I mean, isn't learning two languages better than learning one?
Absolutely.
It opens so many doors economically, personally, and but here's a thing. We may not be having these discussions in the future. I love looking ahead, so I'm going to go sci-fi.
Please do it.
We are really close to the moment where language barriers are going to be dropping like crazy because of technology. Instant translation. Google's working on stuff. There's a bunch of big smart companies with artificial intelligence where this language barrier, it just may be a technical barrier, and it may just go away. So this is all important. And then you start to get into, well, then now it's cultures that you're battling about and perspectives and different things. But I think language in general in the future may not be as much of an issue as we think because of technology.
I just saw on Facebook this morning and I was captivated by it because I thought, wow, how much simpler is traveling going to be now with this small device? And so all they do is say, you know, I only speak English. Hi, where's the bathroom? And they're over in Tokyo. Hi, where's the bathroom? Goes like this, and in their language, it says, hi, where's the bathroom? So you're like, oh, cool. So now they're able to communicate because of what? This piece of technology. But then it's dumbing our brains down, I think.
And the language is just one part. It's very important, but it's just one part of communication. Let me give you a short story. I took French in high school. I was that guy, okay?
And
because I thought it was interesting. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Trying to get the girls.
I thought it was interesting. I was really intrigued, and I'm glad. I've got Tahitian family members. It's a weird thing. My uncle married a Tahitian woman. I was traveling on the way back. I was in Tahiti with my aunt's sister, and she spoke only French and Tahitian. We did not. I used rudimentary high school French, and just signing and just understanding and communicating with your eyes, with your face, pointing to things. It's a very basic form of communication, but it is a language itself of just trying to relate to people and figure out what is going on. We would sit there at the dinner table, and we would have my high school French and her full French and Tahitian, and we hung out for a whole week, and it was great. We could communicate, even though language was a really small part of that.
Isn't that a beautiful thing? Isn't that what language is at the end of the day? I mean, there is that common, music is a common language, right? We all can relate to it. It makes us feel a certain way, the rhythms, the beats, all of that. When it comes to words, they're the same words, they just sound different, right? So it's building that bridge between, and I think to be able to speak multiple language is oh my gosh, it is such a beautiful experience, and I wish I knew more of it. More people are commenting though. I know we have a lot of people.
I want to read all of them, but they keep moving down so fast that I can't keep up with it, and people are, I mean, this is great. I mean, we're getting so many comments, but it's coming in too fast where I can't scroll that fast.
It says, Arlene, you four are uneducated. Oh. Thank you. Other countries, I thought it said educated at first, which is why we are uneducated, according to Arlene. Other countries speak English because we are the world's superpower. You want to teach your kids second, third, fourth languages, send them on your time and dimes. What does that have to do with us being uneducated, though?
I know, I thought we just talked about how we think that we are.
Sorry if you misunderstood us. Yeah, no, we definitely acknowledge all of that. And we are all educated here. Just I pay a lot of student loans. I'm educated. I'm just saying. Charlene Bennett Reagan, sign language should be taught. Yes, ASL. ASL, American Sign Language, not speaking English is a choice. But I do agree, American Sign Language, another language that yes, we should all take time to learn.
There's more than American Sign Language. There's foreign language, sign language. It all comes together. It all came together organically in each language. So there's a lot of similarities for gestures and stuff, but there are different sign languages.
And how about emojis? That's another way of us to communicate.
Right, and that's new, but you can communicate with someone. You don't speak the same language. You could use emojis because that's your face. You communicate with your face. Your facial reactions say it all. For example.
For example,
when my alarm clock goes off.
Like that?
You know what I'm saying.